Welcome. We're here today, to really talk about how you can sort of escape the grind, especially to learn about how real estate can free dentists from burnout. My name is Rashmi Chanduraj. I'm the founder of Oxstone Capital Partners. I'm delighted to share with you that I'm bringing this webinar to you live from Bangalore, India. Yeah, it's about like 11:30 in the night. But I am super psyched about this opportunity to bring the experience of our guest. But the other thing that I wanted to point out, I think, for me personally, my entrepreneurial sort of journey has helped me, be able to travel, work from anywhere around the world, and I definitely have like a new appreciation for the word freedom today. But having said that, I'm actually thrilled to have you all join us, as I know we have like incredible insight and an insightful discussion about how real estate investing can help busy dental professionals create passive income, achieve financial freedom, and sort of reduce some of that clinical burnout. As dentists, I'm sure you're more focused on the well-being of your patients. And today, what I want to focus on is your financial future, your work-life balance, how real estate can become a solution to building like a life you truly want. I think that's what the goal is. Before we kind of dive in, I want to remind everyone, that this webinar is obviously interactive. So if you have questions, definitely use this opportunity because we have an awesome guest. So use the opportunity. Please use the Q&A box and ask any questions. Without further ado, I'm super excited to have our special guest. He's also a partner in a deal, someone who knows this journey firsthand and has successfully taken steps to balance his dental career with building a passive income portfolio. Let me introduce you to Dr. Pete Butkus. Pete is a dear friend, a dentist who owns a group practice based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And speaking with Pete, he was like so many healthcare professionals. He didn't really get like a formal business, education or financial training during his career. He jumped into real estate really as he bought his dental practice. Seeing that, consistent sort of passive income, I think was his first step to moving away from that, clinical burnout after, 10 years of practice. I'm sure it ignited a passion for learning as much as he could about real estate and investing in personal finance. Pete realizes that investing smarter could provide, enough passive income and freedom to choose dentistry on his terms rather than feeling stuck without, like not having options. Over the years, Pete has invested as a limited partner in several real estate syndications. We're obviously going to learn more about how he got into that, including, self-storage fund. He's done RV campground, mobile home parks. He's invested in a, 224 unit apartment complex and, another 24 unit, portfolio that's in his local market. What's inspiring is how Pete has actually used like really creative strategies to actually get here. He's used what's called a self-directed IRA, which allowed him to convert his 401k to invest. This approach has actually helped him, obviously, and unlock capital that he once thought was, like untouchable until much later. Anyways, Pete's ultimate goal is, being able to achieve financial freedom for his family much sooner than he thought was be possible, and share sort of his journey with others. In the same way, Pete, I think in speaking to Pete, what's exciting, to me and inspiring is, the passion that he has, for his family, the practice, and, to be able to give back. Pete, we're so excited, to have you here today. So welcome.
Thank you, Rashmi. I first of all, I'm honored that you asked me, and I really appreciate it, and hopefully I can bring some value to the people that tune in. So, um, like you touched upon, you said the word a few times. To me, if I boiled everything down, like the reason I care about investing in personal finance, and I can get into it later, but I didn't really used to care about that. But it's freedom. Like the busier I get in life, the more I value my freedom and the ability to make the choices to do what I want when I want, within reason, of course. But so that's the most atomic version of why I do all of this. So
That's Pete, like that story is like totally relatable, right? uh it's not just, I'm sure many dentists, who are part of this, they that would relate to them. But burnout is really like, it's a very real issue. Like, I did corporate, for 20 plus years. um I, you know I won't say burnout necessarily that what got me to move away from it, but it was a bit of, let me see what else is out there. But it was a little bit of family and being available for kids, and, and so on. So there's definitely, a piece of that. And but I think in the end it's about, being able to take control of your life, so uh
mhm.
I think it's a great segue to, to how we're going to kick this off. Pete, share with us a little bit about, your personal story, of, like, how did you go about, dealing with burnout as a dentist? What were sort of, specific challenges, that you faced? And what was that turning point that kind of led you to, wanting to invest in, hard assets and, real estate?
Yeah. Um, so I've always wanted to be a dentist, and my grandfather was a dentist, so there's kind of a family legacy component there. But uh, and I can get into that if you think it's of value. But to answer your question, I really had no burnout or no big signs of burnout until my twins were born. And so my wife and I are blessed with three beautiful children. Our daughter's 6.5 and our boys are 3.5. And I view time as like BT and AT, before twins and after twins, because
I love it.
I mean it is having two little boys, just the synergy there. It's almost like having 2.5 or 3 or something. I mean, it's tough. My wife stays home with the kids. I don't know how she does that. I can barely handle, like, if she goes out of town for a weekend, but I'm I'm uh I'm just not as well suited for it as she is. But um I love my kids, and I think when I really started to feel burned out was when I'll work a longer day from like 7 or 8 a.m. and be done at 5, but maybe not get home till 6 because of notes and stuff like that. And then I'd come home and I just wouldn't have enough time and energy, and I'd just kind of feel crappy about, like, daddy wants to go upstairs and just relax for a little bit, or I needed certain time for myself. And I just kind of realized, like, I'm so lucky to be in the position I am, because I've achieved the goal, my lifelong goal of being a dentist and a practice owner, but I'm not really governing my time the way that I want. And um so honestly, I read, it's kind of cliched, but I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, like a lot of real estate investors talk about, and that was probably about a couple of years ago. And that was just completely eye-opening to me. And anyone who's interested in their own personal finance, whether they're interested in real estate or not, I would highly recommend it. It just makes you think differently about money. But I read that, and it was kind of at the right time for me. And I thought, I got to do something different here. Because another symptom of my burnout was I had just crazy passion for dentistry. I was super passionate. I take a bunch of clinical photos, I share them via a dental Instagram account, and I love connecting with other dentists and clinicians. And I aspire to teach at some point in my career. Of course, that requires a little more freedom too, but um, I think those are the two big things. When I started, really not feeling like I was giving enough and being as good of a dad as I should be because I was tired and, had a tough patient or tough procedure. And then also when kind of losing my train of thought here, when I
I know you
mean,
were
that's,
talking
oh,
about.
my passion. I'm sorry. Yeah. When I can't even identify a certain moment, but when I just stopped looking forward to doing dental CEs and to constantly sharpening my sword, and don't get me wrong, I try my best for my patients. I I am a hard worker, but the hunger to get better and to learn more, it's just been dulled by the busyness of life. And so that's why freedom, I think about it all the time. That's the one word that's like super important to me. And um, that's why I care about money, because it's a means to freedom. Like if it didn't have any association with freedom, I probably wouldn't care about it so much. But
Yeah, no, that is so true. And I love the passion of of being able to not just, care for the patients, but also being able to give back, right? And teach. I love that. I'm sure that sort of comes from, family, right? Because you mentioned your granddad was in that,
mhm.
same space. So yeah, no, and absolutely to be able to, give back, you do need that, sort of mental, space to, for that to happen. You mentioned about, buying into sort of, real estate as part of your like dental office, and how, like that light bulb moment, like went off, right? Um, what did you see in that experience that made you believe that, real estate investing could be sort of that long-term solution? I mean, outside of, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and what, like that reading and what you took away, like what got you to actually taking that action? Because I think that's sometimes the biggest gap, right?
Yeah. It really, like you said, it really was a light bulb moment. So historically, I'm in a group practice in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's an awesome practice. It's 51 years old this year, so it's been around.
Wow.
I mean, as far as group practices, it's pretty quite old, but um, on kind of a main corridor in St. Paul. And historically, there would be different amounts of owners depending on, a lot of things like when certain people are going to retire and things like that. But also they own this building. It's this big commercial building that the dental practice is the only tenant of. And the ownership of that would kind of ebb and flow and follow the ownership of the practice, which kind of makes sense. But um, when I bought into the building, I just realized like, wait, there's almost no expenses because it's a triple net lease. And I don't know if we need to get into that, but um, so the building entity pays very little expenses. Like the profit and loss statement's like teeny compared to probably any other business, certainly compared to our dental practice. And so it requires almost no management. We do the books for it, but that takes no time. And I get a check. My partner helps cut the checks and does most of the bookkeeping, but I get a check at about the same time every month for X amount. And it's literally as passive as I think it could be. And I just thought,
Yeah.
and sometimes I need a little help. I think after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, that did help me. But I just thought, wait, I mean, I didn't even mean to invest in this. I always wanted to be a dentist. It's not like I wanted to be a dentist and a dental practice owner of the real
Yeah.
estate. But when I became one, I just thought, man, when being a dentist is tough. It's super rewarding in certain ways, but it's really tough. You're dealing with the psychology of the patients. You have the ability to cause pain, which is awful. No dentist wants, and you want to avoid that. But so you're always juggling that, and you try to do procedures to your best ability. But when it comes to an investment like the real estate, it almost feels unfair. I mean, you're just making money every month, and it's consistent because the rent is consistent and the expenses are
Yeah.
mostly fixed, / we don't really have that many under a triple net lease.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I got to look into this more. I'd be stupid not to. So
Right. No, that's great. Let's get into a little bit of, what is a triple net lease? Just for the audience who don't know what a triple net is, if you can maybe just elaborate
sure.
a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure someone could easily poke holes in this. So I'll try to give
Yeah.
I've only researched it because I want to understand what I own and how it pertains to me. But the way that I understand it is a triple net lease. Basically, so myself, I own half of my dental practice, the entity of the practice that we provide, dental care to patients, and I own half of the actual physical building of the practice. I happen to have the same partner for both. And so almost all of the expenses that come with the real estate are paid for by the dental practice entity, not the real estate entity. So, which is kind of different from most leases. The main expense we have, I can't remember if I think it's taxes or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's about the same amount every year. And other than that, like we needed 6 air conditioning units 2 years ago. And so the dental practice had to pay for that. So it's a great thing to be the landlord of a triple net lease. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you wanted to add to that, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, no, I think, it's definitely a great, way to add to sort of your portfolio without the overload of, expenses, because I think, triple net for one, it's any commercial, um, building where the lessee pays, sort of the rent, utilities, as well as, like I think they're talking about maybe the three is because it's, all of the expenses which comes with insurance, maintenance, and taxes, the three big
Mhm.
things are sort of, taken care of, which is why it's, a great, asset, so
And I
that's,
think,
that's awesome.
yeah, and I think, the trade-off is commercial properties can be hard to fill, and I would be nervous owning just any commercial property, even if it was a triple net lease, because what if you own a warehouse and you rent it out to a brewery? Well, if that brewery leaves, then it's a warehouse that was hard to rent before this special type of tenant wanted to move in. But thankfully, I happened to be in both of them. And even if I wasn't involved in the dental practice, banks love to lend to dental practices because as a business, they have a very high success rate. And, we're not moving our building. It's been, or our practice from our building, it's been there for 50 years. We have plenty of room. So there's all these reasons that in my particular scenario, it has worked out great, and I'm very fortunate. So
No, that's great. As sort of a dentist who's, like owning the practice, given that you have twins and, just the demands of, like the practice, how do you sort of go about, juggling, the what you need to do with your practice, and how do you sort of plan for, like the future, saying, okay, well, like, yeah, this is great, I can do this, you know like, what do you see as the biggest challenge there, that maybe you and other dentists sort of face, when they're trying to balance that, busy, clinical kind of career and mapping that to long-term, financial planning.
Yeah. I mean, that's a question I honestly struggle with every day because
Yeah.
life is very busy, and it's very important to me to be present for my kids. And I don't, as much as I love my work, I have to make sure I have my priorities in order, and that I'm giving enough time and energy to them. But one thing that my boys have taught me is, and just having a family, a growing family, is I don't want to do this until I'm 65, working clinically. I'm 37 now. I certainly, compared to a non-dentist average person, I've got neck pain and back pain and things that I really shouldn't have, but it makes sense because it's from dentistry. And just psychologically and emotionally, I do love it, but I'm kind of so busy that it's kind of, that love is starting to wane a little bit. And so I've realized that I need to be mindful about what my plans are for the future. And like I said, I'd like to teach at some point, but I certainly can't just add that to my plate. So I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the last 3.5 years is I need to pay attention to what's going on with my own personal finances, because honestly, I never used to pay that close of attention to it. And that's, I think, just, I was never really taught a whole lot about money growing up. And the main thing I inherited from my parents was kind of a sense of worry about money. And as silly as it sounds, I remember thinking, oh, my grandfather's a dentist. There's all these reasons I want to be a dentist. And one thing everyone hears that, you're a dentist, it's really not that hard. You get Fridays off, and there's truth to that. I'm off right now. It's a Friday, but I thought, you know what, I'll become a dentist and I just won't worry about it. And that's literally what I did for the first like 6 or 8 years of my career. And I'm not ashamed to say it because that's just how I was. It is what it is. But since then, since the busyness of life has really set in, I've just realized that, no one's gonna help you with your finances but you and your spouse, or who, the people that really care. No one else cares about it. So I could easily live a perfectly happy life and, get to 65 and retire, but at what cost? I mean, I don't think I would be happy not having tried to do better for myself and my family. And so every day I'm trying to make sure I work on figuring out where my priorities are, that the dental practice is incredibly important. The work that I provide for my patients, I take very seriously, but my family's happiness and well-being is just right above that. So prioritizing.
I love that approach. I know you've also sort of, tried to balance that with, like prioritizing not just family, but prioritizing your practice, being mindful of, how you allocate your time. And I love that approach that you had, talked about earlier in our conversation, where you went into, like, how real estate investing, not just with your triple net, when you bought the practice, but also you expanded sort of, your real estate portfolio, investing as a limited partner in a syndication. Walk us through sort of, like, how did that get started? What was that trigger? Why did you choose sort of a syndication over maybe another triple net lease, or, owning other like single family homes or other rentals?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My investment in the dental practice that I own is such a unicorn. I don't know if I'll ever be able to invest in anything like that. Not that there's not triple net leases, but if dentists, or even mildly smart, they usually buy the practice if they have an opportunity, unless it's in a strip mall or something like that. So the opportunity doesn't come up very often. And so I did just a bunch of research. I knew, everyone's heard that saying that 80% or 90% of all millionaires are made via real estate. I don't know if that's actually a true statement, but it's probably, if you check the facts, it's got to be really high up there. It's
Yeah.
probably the most time tested way to build wealth if you make wise decisions.
Yeah.
And so I was never, I thought I owed it to myself to research as much as I could about real estate investing in general. And I had some ideas with where I was interested in, but I thought I should look at, flipping land, all sorts of things, and really try to have a decent idea of what my options would be. But I always knew that, I'm proud of the skills that it's taken me a long time to build as a dentist. I can fix a tooth with a lot of confidence, predictably, and all those things. But man, I can barely patch a hole in the drywall, and I don't have those skills. I never learned it, and I have no business flipping a house. My wife is a physical therapist. She's a wonderful mother, but like me, we just never had that kind of background where we were good at managing people necessarily, and with construction or um, fixing homes, dealing with contractors. And I know that I had always heard that it's hard to scale single family homes. So um, if I had all the free time in the world, I probably still wouldn't pursue that. It just doesn't really fit my skill set. So
Yeah.
apartment investing, or assets like apartments, mobile home parks, self-storage, things like that, had always from the beginning appealed to me. And so that's quickly kind of the avenue that I pursued, because of the scalability, because you can invest pretty darn passively. You can get active in it. And, I don't know if it's worth talking about at this point, but as a dentist or a lawyer or a doctor, I've talked to so many people that say, "Oh, I'd love to get into real estate." And most people don't really want to take those grimy steps or have the ability and time to roll up their sleeves and flip a house. But a lot of those people do have money in set aside or in their 401ks that they can self-direct. And that's something else we can get into, but, and can invest in a way that you're partnering with an operator who's been doing this for a long time. And to me, that's the biggest risk. You really have to vet the operator and make sure you trust them and understand the deal and things. But once you have that, and especially if they've been doing it for a while and they're conservative in their underwriting, you invest the money. Your risk is the investment itself. You're not putting up any earnest money or anything like that. And so it's really a cool way to get into real estate, but not have to, you're kind of leveraging your partner's experience, and you don't have to be responsible to learn all these things and not have time with it. If you want to practice, you have kids, it's just bordering on irresponsible, at least in my case, to try to like flip a home or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's definitely, like I think, you double down on the skill set, right? Like, or like Dan, Solomon says, your unique ability. I feel like you double down on that. And yeah, like I love that. Especially being a busy sort of professional, trying to do, run a practice and, be able to flip a home is probably not, like the best, um, place to be in. But yeah, no, that's great. And syndications obviously are a great avenue. Like just real estate in general. Obviously, I'm biased, but it also provides, other, opportunities to, like, for example, benefiting from, bonus depreciation and, benefiting from that, tax strategies that kind of work for you. Obviously, you'll have to, get a CPA or a tax strategist to, work with you on that. But those are actually some of the things that what kind of got me into real estate, as when I was doing my corporate job. So that's obviously a great way to, to get in and hone in on that. Um,
Mhm.
that's great. Have you
Yeah,
ever,
and I
have
think
you dabbled with stocks or bonds?
so.
To see if, yeah,
I mean, no, really not, except for the index funds that my 401k is invested in, and it's that level of kind of apathy and lack of excitement. I mean, I know any investment that you make, you should A, understand it, and B, try to invest with logic and not feeling, but I do have to have some interest in it. And so
yeah,
um, I don't necessarily, I can't really speak on why you should or shouldn't invest in the stock market, but it didn't appeal to me so much. And all the aspects of real estate, like the tax benefits, you know, building in and having equity in something until you sell it, of course, or just
yeah,
if you don't, having cash flow. I mean, cash flow
yeah,
is a great thing. Um, there's something about it's a tangible asset, which really, for some reason, means a lot to me. Um, you know, these things don't really go away for the most part. And
yeah.
if they do, hopefully you're insured. But it's I just never was super excited about the stock market, and I definitely never had. I don't know if I have the discipline to kind of mess around and I don't want to be a day trader or anything. I would just want to invest and forget about it for a while, whatever it is. And so the syndication method suits that well, with typically the holds being anywhere from 3 to 7 years, and every deal can be different, but getting cash flow in that time and then getting money from the sale. And then the one of the biggest benefits that a lot of other assets don't have, asset classes, is being able to not pay capital gains tax on that, at least right away. And in theory, you can just 1031 exchange. You can take those proceeds and put it into another like kind investment, which is basically any type of real estate, and do it over again and watch your money grow. So those are the main reasons why I've never been too interested in other avenues of investing.
Yeah. No,
Some people might say that's silly, but it's, to me, it's better than not doing anything. So
no, absolutely. I think, like real estate definitely affords, all of those very reasons. But I'm sure that was not easy, right? It did take a little bit of, time, or maybe a lot of time, just diving into, just something new that you had to learn to invest in. Like, what advice would you give, like, other dentists who are interested in starting to invest in real estate? Like, but don't really have like either the time to dedicate, like what are simple steps that they can take,
yeah,
to kind of kickstart that journey?
that's a great question. I think, and everyone says this, but it really is good advice. I think, first of all, you have to define like what's important to you and why. So, do you want to build a nest egg for retirement, long term, or do you want cash flow, or do you want a mixture of both? And does it matter to you that it's interesting? Obviously, you need to be able to research it enough to understand it, but is it something that you want to be involved in potentially? That's another cool thing about real estate, is I would like to get to the point where I have a little more time freedom, and where I can get a little more active on these types of investments. But if I own Apple stock, I'm never going to be on the board of Apple or running the company. So not saying that it's a bad investment because of that, but that's
Sure.
just, I, for some reason, that's kind of important to me. Um, and just really taking some time to define what you want your future to look like, and when you want your retirement to be and what that looks like. So for before I really got interested in my own personal finance, I had no clue kind of what the number was that I'd have to hit to retire. Like, how much will I have in the bank when I'm 65? And now to me, I have a specific number that if I were to reach that number in cash flow a month, that could more than cover the debt that I have and my living expenses and make sure that we can live comfortably, then I would seriously consider, you know, getting to a point where maybe I practice a couple days a week, maybe I teach a little bit, and maybe I free up some more time to really learn the active side of real estate. So defining that is the biggest for me, the biggest thing. And then from there, I think just educating yourself and trying to educate yourself on the broadest scope of what you're interested in, and then really getting narrowed down and really trying not to, you know, shoot a fire hose at things, but really trying to get specific on what's going to get you to your goals and what's going to interest you and have a little fun along the way. So being specific, I think, is important too.
Oh my God, those are, like golden because, I think knowing your why and, that's what's going to keep you going, right? And knowing what your goal is in terms of, what's that magic number that's going to get you that financial freedom, I think is powerful. I know in your existing portfolio currently, you kind of do have like a little bit of uh, a diversification there between multifamily, some mobile home parks, and others, including, your dental practice, which is triple net. I feel like that's such a good blend of, like just the different asset classes within a commercial real estate. Um, how has that sort of impacted, like your career? Was that deliberate in terms of, looking at all of these different asset classes? Even if it was not deliberate and it just happened to fall into place, how does one compare to the other? Um, you
Yeah.
know,
That I wish I could say had the foresight and was wise enough to deliberately diversify it, but it just kind of worked out that way. And I'm glad it did. But I kind of got into, I had no idea what syndications were like 3.5 years ago, but I started following a dentist on like a nerdy dental message board website who was talking about real estate syndications. And it took me a long time, even took me really a long time to realize like he's not only doing this because he's a nerd and he loves it. He's a nerd and he loves it, but he's educating other dentists because he believes in it and he can help, raise capital for the real estate investors that he's partnering with. And then, slowly kind of getting on the active side of things while still maintaining a practice and things like that. But so this dentist, he's a specialist from Louisiana, and I got on his mailing list and I was just learning a lot from him. And then I learned a certain amount and then I did my own research. But essentially I've invested in 4 syndications. My first one was 2.5 years ago or something like that. And it's a fund, which is like syndications plural. So just several properties put together as one asset or an investment. And it's a self-storage fund. And it's honestly been okay. I mean, I think the landscape has changed such that some of their assumptions I'm not necessarily worried about a capital call or losing money, but it hasn't really had super strong distributions to what they had projected. But it's also more of a long-term hold. So I'm okay with that.
yeah.
But, and it is cool to be part of a very small owner of all these storage units. And so like most syndications, they're improving them and improving the business plan and making things run more efficiently. So that was my first investment. And, as someone who wasn't super experienced with personal finance and talking, my wife and I wouldn't have conversations about money very often back then. So it took me quite a few months to kind of explain to her why I was so interested in this and why this might be beneficial and why I've done enough research that I don't believe it's going to be a bad idea. And the worst fear is losing all your money or losing some of it. But so then the next one, then I invested in 3 in the last year and a half. And one of them was a deal that we both kind of worked on. And it's a 224 unit apartment complex in Lubbock, Texas. And I had just like you did, Rashmi, I had the really kind of unique opportunity to spend some time with the operators at a conference that we went to. And man, you don't normally have that opportunity, but to be able to get to know the operators that way and to really ask them a bunch of questions and get to know them personally, it really made me feel comfortable investing in that deal and all the other things. Like Lubbock's a growing area. There's a lot of jobs going in there. The underwriting I liked. And so that was my second deal. Another one was a 24 unit apartment complex in the Twin Cities here. And the operator of that used to actually be my dental implant rep, which he kind of got let go a few years ago because another representative wanted his territory and snitched him out for being a real estate agent on the side. And so he would tell you it's a blessing in disguise, but that's another reason that I trust him as an operator. And he's allowed me to shadow him and kind of get to know as much as I can about how he runs his business and the business in general. So I've invested in that. And then one thing you touched upon, Rashmi, is I probably wouldn't have been able to make this investment, but I learned over the last year about how you can take an old 401k, meaning it can't be active. Trust me, I've looked into it for my own 401k, but my wife, her full-time job is staying at home with the kids right now. And she used to be a physical therapist. I mean, she still is, but she doesn't do that right now actively. So she had this 401k with more money than I realized in it. And I learned from just social media and being interested in it and doing my own research and talking to people like you, that you can take that 401k and self-direct it, which basically means you turn it into an IRA that the custodian allows you to invest in almost anything, like certainly real estate. You could do crypto, you could do gold, you could do almost whatever you want. And so you're really taking charge of what you're investing in. And so I think the main caveat is you still can't use that money until 59 and a half, but you're growing it and you're more engaged in it in a way that you weren't before. At least that's my experience. So I invested in a campground / mobile home park / RV park. And that's been a super exciting investment. It's been so fun to follow. It's been performing better than they projected. And, it's fun to get these investor updates, and every operator is kind of different, but I'll get a YouTube video like once a month or something. And just a really fun investment. It's performing really well. I look forward to when I get those emails, and it's weird. I'm excited about growing my net worth in a way that I never thought I would be. So
that's awesome. I love it. I love, hearing that. Just I think one of the biggest challenges, when you're doing a syndication, and I'd love to sort of hear, like your thoughts on this, because when you're evaluating a syndication deal, there's obviously a lot to consider. And you kind of touched upon it, earlier. You talked about market research, like in Lubbock, you talked about underwriting and how you need to be conservative. Um, you talked about, sort of doing your due diligence earlier on an operator. And, and I loved, your commitment to being able to learn and educate yourself in the space, where you did attend those conferences and, built that network and, just to understand, what it is, right? Like you've taken a lot of those steps. I want to sort of, get your experience in what should, what, I mean, again, this is specifically because our audience here, are for the most part dentists. But I think this applies to any syndication opportunity, right? Like what would be sort of red flags or key metrics that you should be paying attention to when you're deciding, like which syndication deal that you want to move forward with? Talk to us a little bit about that and what your sort of thought process is.
Yeah. And I'll start this by saying I'm always learning. And so, this might not be, some people might think that I'm too aggressive or too conservative in terms of what my metrics are for investing. But um, a big thing is trust. Like, you're investing in, when you invest in a syndication, you join a partnership. Um, but you're really investing and you're trusting in the operators, the general partners, the people that ideally have done this before. I mean, I don't think I'd take a chance on someone it's their first or second syndication. There's just no reason to. You want to see that they've done it before. You should be able to easily get, the they should want to share with you kind of how the deals have gone in the past. And, not every deal maybe has performed the way it was supposed to. Like things like COVID have made a huge difference in um, real estate and the housing market, or 2008. But as long as they can explain why, and you feel like there's transparency there, that is a huge part of it. I try to get to know the underwriting as best as I can, but I certainly won't tell you that I'm the best at underwriting. You wouldn't want to invest on a deal if I was the only one that underwrote it. I'll put it that way. But looking at things like the projected exit cap rate and just what they're buying it per unit for compared to other recent purchases in the market, those sorts of things. And it's really not that hard to find someone who, if you do a little bit of networking, if that's not your strong suit, you can find someone that can kind of help look at these things for you, and that's kind of fun. That's a way to do that. I mean, those are really the main two things. I suppose you could invest in, if you decide you just want apartment buildings, that's okay. But I don't know why you wouldn't you can syndicate almost any asset like that, like any business that brings in cash flow from recurring clientele that's on a parcel of land. So to me, it's just fun to learn more about these things. I think that's why I've invested in 4 very relatively different types of assets. So trust is the biggest, and just making sure that you get to know the operators pretty well, or you've had friends or colleagues that have done it. I mean, if they've done it in like, hey, these distributions are coming out exactly like they said, or similar, or, they didn't start as soon and here's why, or, you know what, it didn't work out well, I would not invest with them. So that sort of thing.
Yeah. I know one of the other things that you talked about, which maybe for our audience, we want to elaborate a little bit is, capital call, right? Like as part of due diligence, that's one of the areas that you definitely want to look at, from an operator, like what is a capital call? Like why are they asking to raise more money for equity? What happened? Why was there an underwriting related issue? Sometimes, it's unfortunate just because it's a time, it can happen to a best operator as well. But, to know the reason, why becomes so important. But
And
I
how
think
they
those
deal
are
with that question, I think, is important too. Like if they're just shysty and
100%.
want to not talk about it, that's a red flag to me. I don't necessarily
Yeah.
care that happened. If you give me a good reason and you're okay with talking about it. So
Right. Right. As an investor or as a partner, it goes back to being able to, like, communication becomes key. So you obviously want to make sure that, like they're building the trust, to your point with, the investors. No, that's great.
mhm.
Yeah. Uh, Finally, Pete, like I know we talked about, just sort of your journey. What does, sort of the long-term goal, for you look like? I know we touched on a few things in terms of, your teaching and so on. How has your journey so far sort of shaped that vision, from a retirement standpoint, or even, like being able to step back, from your practice maybe one day. But what does that look like? How do you um, break down that, that process?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, I think we need to be patient with ourselves. Most times things don't happen overnight. And secondly, I think it's also okay to let things change, and your goals 10 years from now might be different. Mine certainly are, since I've had kids. But um, yeah, for me, long term, it is a goal of mine to have the ability, not saying I'm going to do this, but to truly have the choice. I know I can retire from dentistry today if I wanted to, but there's huge consequences. To have the ability to choose to retire in my 40s. I'm 37 now. Um, and like I said, I don't think I'll stop cold when I'm 45 or 48. I would
Yeah.
love to have that ability to choose at that point, but I want to free up some more time. Potentially, to do that, I would probably need to remove myself from the ownership position of the practice at that point. Um, and then also, you know, a big part of my passion is I truly love learning from other dentists, and also teaching or sharing my cases. And my grandfather he was a both a teacher and an administrator at the dental school I went to, and his shoes were so big it was almost unfair. But I've gotten to a point where I've realized, like, oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing okay. And so I don't know if it's genetic or whatever, but I do have a kind of a desire to teach and to help my profession that way. So that's, again, I can't do those things um, without getting the ability to step back a little bit. Um, and then I just want to, I want to enjoy time with family. I want to get to know my kids as they become young adults, and I want to keep myself in shape so that I can walk my daughter down the aisle and dance at their weddings and keep up. It's hard enough keeping up with my kids now. Like, I can't imagine when I'm 65, 70. So I got to keep myself in okay shape. And so just living a
Love it.
balanced life. So
That's awesome. I do want to, open it up, to questions if anyone in the, audience wants to, has any questions specifically about, uh, like investing in real estate, or, particularly about, some of the things that Pete just shared. Please feel free to, post. Um, but that said, Pete, I mean, this has been just incredible. Just you sharing sort of your journey with us, sharing your story. I'm sure is like inspiring, and it's incredibly sort of practical. I'm sure the folks, not just dentists but others, can kind of take control of their financial future, and be able to learn from some of the like your journey and where you are, and being able to kind of look to what your future sort of holds for you. I think that's great. Again, to you know everyone who's attending today, if Pete's sort of story sparked of interest in real estate investing, we definitely encourage you to take like that first step. It's really, I think, uh, being bold and taking action that is, really like that first, step, as, frightening as it can be. It's definitely the trigger to kind of start your journey. But if there's anything that they want to learn, Pete, from you, what's the best way for them to reach
yeah,
out to you?
I'm happy to give out my email. It's just my name. I think you guys can see it in the box there. It's spelled Pete, Pete, Butkus, Butkus at gmail.com. Just all one word.
Yeah.
Or I have
And I know you
there's
talked about your sorry, I think that's
Yeah,
what you were
yeah,
mentioning.
yep.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't think this would do so much for Rashmi because she's not a dentist. My dental Instagram account, it's like straight up just in the trenches dentistry. And I don't think if you don't have a dental background, it probably doesn't do much for you. And if you do, maybe it still doesn't. But my dental account is at dr, my last name, Butkusp. That's it. And so I always try to check the messages regularly on there. So,
Yeah.
but to piggyback off what you said, Rashmi, like you can never go wrong by educating yourself. Like you might read a whole book about options trading or something I know nothing about, but you're better off for reading that book. So, I mean, you're not, that doesn't marry you to anything. So it's a small form of action, but just educating yourself and trying to learn more and maybe sparking more interest is, I think, the best thing that you can do to get started.
No, and to the audience, if you're ready to kind of take the next step, definitely schedule a call with us. You will get a recording of this session and a follow-up. So feel free to sort of reach out to us. Thank you again for joining us today. Pete, my God, your insights were truly invaluable. And I know like our audience has, taken away, much from your journey. So until next time, take care. And, we'll look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you guys, again soon. Happy almost Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope someone found that valuable. And yeah, thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.